I'm Brian Druker. I'm the CEO of the Oregon Health and Science University Knight Cancer Institute. We are founded on precision oncology, which is targeting the right patient with the right medication based on knowledge of what drives their cancer. And that obviously started with our work on imatinib or Gleevec. And we're trying to develop treatments like Gleevec for every single patient with cancer so we can get the amazing outcomes that our patients with CML have.
What was it about CML particularly that triggered your interest?
I've always been fascinated by leukemia, but when I started my laboratory work, I was working on a family of enzymes that are called tyrosine kinases. In simpler terms, these are just enzymes that regulate cell growth, and it's sort of like an off and on switch. When a signal tells a cell to grow, these enzymes turn on, start the machinery, force the cells to grow and divide. And in some cancers, these enzymes get stuck on. And it's sort of like a thermostat that got stuck on. Instead of regulating the temperature between 68 and 72, the temperature goes up. And these are enzymes that regulate cell growth, so the cells get a signal to grow, grow, and grow. In the case of chronic myeloid leukemia, or CML, the white count, instead of being 5 to 10,000, goes up to 100, 200, 500,000, because there's a constant signaling of the cell to grow. And so I was just working on this family of enzymes, and I realized that there was a whole series of experiments that showed that the enzymes that I was working on were stuck on in chronic myeloid leukemia. And I said, that's the disease I should be working on. It's a leukemia. I was trained as an oncologist. I was always fascinated by leukemia. And here I am working on an enzyme that's broken in this one leukemia. What if we could develop a drug that turn that enzyme off and might help these patients with this leukemia? And I started on that project in about 1990. In 1993, I moved from Dana-Farber in Boston to Oregon, struck up a collaboration with Nick Leiden, who was at a drug company who had inhibitors of this enzyme.
Was this at Novartis?
Yes, yeah. Novartis. And within 6 weeks of arriving here in Oregon, I had compounds in my lab that killed the leukemia cells and didn't harm normal cells. It took 5 years to convince the drug company to go into this rare disorder.
Yeah.
But ultimately we did, and in 1998 we started clinical trials, and within 6 months, everybody's blood count was returning to normal. Be careful at selecting patients whose white count, when they stopped the treatments they were on, didn't explode. And some people's white count would go 10, 15, 20, 25 over a course of the month off therapy. Some patients would go 10, 100, 200,000 in a couple of weeks off. I didn't put those patients on the very early slots in the trial because if this medicine didn't work, they'd have to go off treatment very, very quickly. When we reached 300 milligrams, I put one of those patients on whose white count exploded off treatment. She was at 125,000 when she started. A week later, she was 122, and I breathed a sigh of relief that it hadn't doubled. 1 week later, it was normal. And I was like, oh, okay, this is something that we haven't seen the likes of before. And there's somebody who had failed every treatment, her white count was exploding rapidly, and now it was normal again. And that was to me convincing proof that this was something, as I said, the likes of which had never been seen before.
I wonder what your thoughts are on the involvement of patients, particularly in sort of CML, what have you?
One of the absolute most remarkable thing is that CML is a pretty rare diagnosis. In the United States, there are 5,000 people diagnosed a year. In our clinical trial, we're having people coming from all over the country, and they were meeting sometimes the very first person they'd ever met who also had CML. And they formed a support group, and they'd meet regularly and talk about the results, their experiences. And to have those patients involved, they put a newsletter together. That support and that camaraderie and that capability of working together with us was absolutely remarkable. I think you're absolutely right in that by involving patients and ensuring that we're meeting their needs is critical to the success of any scientific and clinical endeavor. And if we're answering questions that don't matter to people, who's going to care?
Yeah.
And so we want to, what patients have told us loud and clear is they care about the tolerability of these medications. And ultimately, we'd like to be able to get them off therapy if we can. Those are the things that matter.
Mm.
And those are the things that we continue to work on. Getting more tolerable medications and figuring out what's it going to take to get more people cured.
Hopes for CML in the next sort of 5 or 10 years? Are we going to be looking at a cure more than control?
Most of my patients are well controlled, but have to remain on therapy.
Mm.
It's a very small percent that can stop therapy, and I'm grateful that anybody can.
Yeah.
But it's always mystified me what's different between somebody who has well-controlled disease versus somebody who can stop therapy. And if we could get more people to a point where they could stop therapy, wouldn't that be what we ultimately want to achieve? We have to take the same approach we did in developing imatinib, which is we have to understand what is it about this leukemia that's not allowing us to kill those last few cells? What's allowing them to survive?
Mm.
Well, the trick there is if I take somebody who has a very, very low amount of leukemia, how am I going to get enough leukemia cells to study? So now I've got to figure out how to enrich for those rare cells that are still leukemia, compare them to their normal counterparts, and then I can devise a path forward. So we're working on those purification technologies that would let me enrich for residual leukemia cells so I can figure out what's going on with them. That's turned out to be really hard to do, but I think now we have some of the technologies at hand that will allow us to do that. With the genome, the technologies I'm referring to is we can actually sequence single cells, one cell at a time, and hundreds of thousands of them. So I can barcode individual cells and say, this one is a leukemia cell, that one isn't. And if I sequence enough of them, I'll have enough leukemia cells to compare to their normal counterparts. So that sort of technology is mind-boggling in terms of what wasn't available even 10 years ago.
With further research in the UK much? Or?
Absolutely. So on the CML, on the leukemia projects, we have I was on a conference call with Jane Apperly from Hammersmith this morning.
She's a good friend of ours.
She's going to try and she's carrying the footsteps of one of my heroes in the field, John Goldman. With Cancer Research UK, we have a huge project in collaboration going on in the early detection space. And I was on another conference call with that group this morning. So lots of collaborations in the UK.
How does collaboration internationally help with the common goal?
The beauty of international collaboration is it allows us to get enough patients and samples and experience. And so we've now collected thousands of patients who've been able to stop therapy, and some of those patients' samples can be analyzed to compare who could stop successfully, who couldn't. There's not any center in the country or in the world that has enough patients to do the types of large-scale studies that we need, looking at how do we best predict response? How would we best predict response to each of these medications? How do we determine who's going to have the best responses? And ultimately, how do we get more patients off therapy? And that requires incredible collaborations and internationally.
Mm. Well, Brian, you've given me and my family hope. I can't speak for anyone else, but I know there's a lot of people who share the same sentiments. It's incredible what you've done, what you started, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's not just the one therapy, the one success. It's just breeding success and success. So, thank you so much. It's been really kind of you to take some time to talk.
No, absolutely my pleasure. It's one person at a time, but I show pictures and I tell stories of individuals. But then I bring a group together, and all of a sudden it just starts to add up, and that's what this is all about.
Mm.
is taking care of the person in front of you, but if you help one person and another, it really does start to add up.